listening. Taught me how to be a woman. Show me how love is taken for granted, but be woken. Mama says stay away if they only think we're dead, but not.
It's the Black Elevator. I'm Jesse Lipscombe, your host. Today, we got Aisha Addo. Aisha is a phenomenal woman that has done mind-boggling things, and she does many other things on top of those things. We're going to talk about a ton of these things. One of them is the Power to Girls Foundation, which is focused primarily on giving exactly that, power to girls. Also, though, it's so cool to meet like really mind-boggling tech hope people. Driver sounds like I'm saying driver, right? No, drive her. It was like a Uber specifically to create safe spaces for women to be able to take this. Things that I didn't even think about, obviously, with my man brain. But I love being enlightened to the problems that exist in different intersections that may have passed me by, maybe have passed you by. I know we're going to learn a lot with Aisha, so let's jump into the chat now.
It don't matter cause you're not my papa. I don't care what you thought of. I'm what you thought of.
Aisha Addo, welcome to the Black Elevator. Thank you so very much for being on our podcast. How you feeling today?
Really good, actually. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I have an interesting question I want to start off with, and this is like a hypothetical question, and I think it's a neat one for someone with a finance background. I have an assumption of what your answer might be, but I don't know if I'm right. So somebody gives you $10,000 cash right now, or you get to spend 5 days with anybody on planet Earth. Which one do you pick?
On Earth. Dead or alive?
Yeah, yes, go. Dead or alive. 5 days.
I would honestly choose the 5 days with someone.
Okay, and now, first off, I thought for sure you'd pick the 5 days. That's what I was assuming. If you picked the $10,000, I would have been like, this podcast is over. I don't even know what to say. Now, the reason I asked that, because first, actually, before we get into it, who would you pick? You said dead or alive. I feel like you had a couple names in mind. So give me the top 3 names that popped into your head.
Top 3 names. Honestly, like I'm not super religious, but I'll say Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
be the first person.
For sure.
I would definitely love to have a sit down with Michelle Obama, and her husband, Mr. Barack Obama as well. And then the final person that came to mind, who was the last person? Yeah, those were like the main people that came to mind, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I've really thought extensively about it, but yeah, I think those would be the people that so
far.
I
like it too. I had Michelle in my list as well, and I thought it would be a twofer because there's a good chance over the 5 days that Barack's going to be there anyway. So I felt that's like that's a good bet. Yeah, I asked that because I know, mentoring, for example, is such a huge piece of your life, and for me, it was a for sure. I'm taking 5 days with someone. The opportunities, the ability to learn, just the access, all of that, I think in my mind would be worth more than $10,000 if I'm looking forward, right? Absolutely. Who did you have as a mentor growing up?
Oh man, that's a really good question. So my parents played a huge role in the way that I saw life, but I think from a more professional standpoint, there were a couple of people that I always looked up to as mentors. So I think I had mentors in like 2 ways, in the sense that they were people that I didn't necessarily know, that I didn't have a personal or close relationship with, but always, listen to them, or kind of like, were inspired by them, by their work. Like Oprah would be one person, Michelle Obama, like I said, like, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of people that like, I would see and I'm like, oh, I admire the work that you do. But then in my formative years as an entrepreneur, I think some of the really key people, Carlin Parcel was one of them, Emily Mills was another one, Letitia Rose, who really I think one of the key things that she taught me was, the importance of delegation as a founder. So there's a lot of people that inspired me in different aspects of my journey. And I don't think, I would be as advanced as I am now if it wasn't for that support and if it wasn't for them. So yeah, those are some of my mentors. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. And so for those listening right now, wondering who is Aisha Addo, we're having this conversation, is getting some insight, and I do want to dig into a little bit about why you are here and how you've gotten to where you are. I know I touched on it. You started in a finance background, but that's not where you are right now. So maybe you could just give us a little walk through, baby Aisha growing up, deciding what she wants to do, maybe some of the influence of why you went finance, and then what made the shift into where you are impacting so many young women of color in their lives now.
Yes. So my name is Aisha Addo, and I am a social entrepreneur with a focus on creating safe spaces for girls and for women. I didn't start out as an entrepreneur, of course. I started out as, someone with just regular dreams of, going to school, graduating, finding a nice, stable job, and doing all of those different things. But while I was in school, I recognized that there was a huge gap within the empowerment space, but then more importantly, within the community-based space, where there wasn't a lot of spaces, community organizations that were created specifically with Black and marginalized girls in mind. And that is when I started my entrepreneurial journey by starting Power to Girls Foundation, which essentially is a not-for-profit organization that works to empower, inspire Black and marginalized girls by providing them with tools, resources, support in personal development, mentorship, leadership, entrepreneurship, STEM, and mental health support as well. So that was essentially kind of like my very first, my first leg into the whole world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Throughout that journey, I also started a tech startup called Drive Her, which was a rideshare platform created specifically to provide a safer transportation alternative for women as well. So like I mentioned, everything that I do is very much aligned with the empowerment of girls or women. And then now my organization also founded and created an application that allows for girls to connect with mentors and connect with each other in a safer online space. So that's essentially
Yeah.
me in a nutshell. But from an educational background, I actually went to George Brown College and studied accounting. And today I am a social entrepreneur. So
You're right. Okay, so I'm gonna rewind a little bit because a lot of the things that make a lot of sense to me. I'm an entrepreneur as well. Opened a lot of different businesses, but a lot of the questions I get often were like, I want to start this thing, but how do I do it? So when you opened your very first one, your first jump into entrepreneurship, how did you know how to do it? Like, what were the steps you took, and maybe even some of the pitfalls that you've learned from moving forward? And I mean this more generically on just the idea of, I want to do a thing and you did the thing, right? Like you're doing the things, but what was that and how did you do that? And was there somebody there that was, cheerleading you or giving you advice, or did you just figure it out on your own?
yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, this was not something that I planned, right? So I normally refer to myself as an accidental entrepreneur because I didn't set off as to, I'm going to start this organization and then it's going to do this and it's going to do that. And then we're going to be, this huge, no, like it never started out like that for me. It started out as me identifying a problem and really wanting to solve that problem. So it started as, hey, there was not a lot of opportunities in this community. In my church at that time, there was a lot of young girls, and I realized that there was a big disconnect and a big gap between, the way that the adults were and the way that the girls were. And like, just, there wasn't a lot of conversations happening. There was a lot of talking at, but not necessarily listening and talking to. So I wanted to be that bridge and I wanted to create that space that allowed for all of us to learn. But then more importantly, and I think this is something that is really important, and this actually cuts across all of the different, businesses that I find, is that like, one of the key things is that before anyone else is my customer, I am my very first customer. So everything that I create because one, I have a personal relation to that and I have a personal connection to that. And I think that is really what the true essence of anything that I build really is, because I'm able to connect with it in a way that someone else might not. So for anyone that is out there that, wants to create something and has these ideas, ask yourself, what is my personal connection to this? Because that personal connection is going to translate into your why. And that why is going to be the reason why you're going to keep going when things get tough and when things get challenging. So it really is important to identify what exactly it is that you're doing and how it's connected to you. I think you even have much more fun with the process that way.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Absolutely. So you mentioned in your community, where is that? What is the community that you speak of?
So at that time, I was living in Etobicoke. I was in the Rexdale area, and there was not like, there weren't a lot of programs that were going on there. There were programs, but then one of the things that I realized was that the intersectionalities of being a Black girl and the different aspect of what it means to be a Black girl in different spaces and navigating different spaces is it's not the same as like, other counterparts will experience. So for me, it wasn't just about starting a program. It was really around creating that safe space that allowed for us to bring our whole selves, that allowed for us to express ourselves the way that we knew how, the way that like, if we are in a group and we bring up, issues of racism or issues of privilege or issues of discrimination, you wouldn't feel silenced as to, being able to share, but then you'd feel empowered by hearing the stories of all the people that are around you, because there's a sense of community that comes from that. So for me, that was one of the key things. And I also think, a lot of times, especially when you're working with young girls or young people, is that creating a space that allows for them to share their stories the way that it happens to them is very important and is very vital. Because what you don't want to do is, take away their voice, or what you don't want to do is say that you're giving them a voice. No, you're not giving anyone a voice. You're amplifying
Right.
their voices. You're creating spaces that allows for people to share and for people to really, speak up. So I think that was also some of the things that I identify within my immediate community that caused me to understand that, wow,
Right.
no, there has to be a change and there has to be something better out there.
Okay. Yeah. So I got a question about that. So I understand this, and I see the idea and the importance of having a space, a safe space where these conversations can happen. But also I'm aware that, in the world that is predominantly a white male world, those spaces aren't often offered in the same way. So are you seeing like a bridge and nice transitions from being able to have that, being able to hear your own stories, voice your own stories, and then moving into worlds where it doesn't look like that? Are people entering them a little bit, I guess, more well-equipped to deal with it? Tell me some of the transitional stories on how you've taken some girls and women and they've ended up in these spaces and have performed better than they might have without it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think it's also a very important one because, we are navigating very interesting, like, interesting sectors, right? So I'll give you an example. I entered the tech space, and anyone will tell you the tech space is very male dominated, it's very white dominated. And I entered the tech space as a young Black woman. So when you're filling out these kind of like boxes, right? You're checking off a couple of things. So, between, 20 to 29, check. Person of color or African descent, check. Minority, like, check. Woman, check. So there's a whole lot of different boxes that it seems like, when you're entering a certain space, you check those boxes, right? You fit the bill. But the reality is that you fit the bill that has been created on the outside, but not necessarily the bill that has been created on the inside, because you have to understand that this is, years and years in the making, and you come and you're like, oh, I want to disrupt this space and I want this space to look different. So for me, I think one of the key things that, to be quite honest, was sparked and really translated directly into some of the work that we do at Power to Girls is recognizing that, wow, I can provide my girls with empowerment. I can provide the space that allows for them to, feel like, know that they can be themselves and they can bring their whole selves. But until I'm also able to create opportunities that allows for them to see representation and allows for them to see themselves reflected and represented in every aspect and in every sector that they desire to be in, then I'm not doing my job to its entirety, right? So that is why mentorship is something that, we are bringing at the forefront not to say that we weren't doing that before, we were, but like now we feel like it's so vital and it's so important because the next generation of technology that we're going to be using should be created and should be reflective of the world that we live in, right? We are in an era right now where, we've seen it, we've seen the conversation around diversity, we've seen the conversation around inclusion, we've seen the conversation around, ensuring that tech solutions are not biased because of the people that are building it and the people that are creating it. But one of the things that I think is important, and one of the people that I think we're leaving behind in this conversation is the next generation. Because in retrospect, we wouldn't be using the technology of the next generation. They would, right? So how are we engaging them and how are we ensuring that they see themselves reflected in these spaces? How are we ensuring that they see themselves represented in these spaces? And how are we ensuring that when they do get into these spaces, they are confident in themselves and in their abilities to be able to perform so that they are not judged or they are not sidelined because of the color of their skin, because of their gender, or because they're differently abled, or because of their sexual orientation. No, we're making sure that we're creating a space that allows for them to come with their full selves. And I think that is the reason why it's so important for us to ensure
Right.
that, we're creating that space for mentorship.
Absolutely. Now you've touched on tech a little bit, and I really do want to come back a little bit just for a brief moment about the tech startup that you created, and you mentioned it. The name is awesome. I love it. Drive her, right? So HER. The idea of having a car share, not a card share. I guess it's like an Uber, but it's for women of color to be able to ride safely, right? And I've heard many stories in my own communities about how the lack of that often causes people to not even go places. I'm not going to jump into an Uber with a stranger or a taxi because of all the different experiences they've had. And many of those experiences have often been, sidelined, like we've talked about, silenced, and often people just aren't taking their cars or getting driven places. Now, this seems like a brilliant idea. You also mentioned that it's not something that's at the forefront, that's not happening right now. Can you speak to that and why? And then I got a couple follow-up questions that I'm pretty sure we're on the same page, but I do want to put it on the table because I think it's important, a woman of color coming up with such a wonderful idea and then knowing where it's headed right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think one of the key things to first off, so it wasn't just for women of color, it was designed to be for all women, people that
Gotcha.
identify as women as well. And what the idea of Drive Her came because again, I saw a need within the market and I recognized that, the safety of women was not necessarily the priority of a lot of, all of these like organizations and all these companies that we are familiar with. It was always an afterthought. And it happens like that, in certain spaces where women are always the afterthought. There's been several instances where women have expressed wanting that option of wanting to ride specifically with a woman. And then I also think there's a sense of power that comes from taking your safety into your own hands, right? And recognizing that I am in charge of my own safety. And it's not just from a user perspective, but then also from a driver perspective. So the plan with Drive Her was to ensure that, women got to from point A to point B safely, but then also in between providing economic empowerment for people that wanted, access to extra income. The challenge, however, was that, we entered a space that was heavily influenced by, Uber, Lyft, and all these other companies. So it became very challenging, accessing capital to get it off the ground and to get it running. We run for a little bit, but then we ran out of cash. And we're like, okay, we're trying to raise. And it was just very tough and very challenging. And I think one of the key things that experience in itself taught me was just the entrepreneurship space in itself is not a space for the weak, right? You have to have that mental capacity. You have to have that, like, there's so many things, of course, all the gurus will tell you, all the things that you have to have. But I think for me, it wasn't just about that. It was really around creating a systematic change within an industry that had become super male dominated, but then also an industry that wasn't taking into account the experiences of women. So we put it on hold a little bit, and for the past couple of years really have been exploring also how to make the model in itself sustainable, right? So if
Sure.
you are running something from a more I'll use the word grassroots for a lack of a better word. From a more grassroots perspective, from a more community-based perspective, from a more connected perspective, in the sense that you want to feel connected to your staff, like you want to feel connected to, your drivers, you want to feel connected to your users and stuff like that. There is a way that you would do things differently from the way that your predecessors have done it, right? But then one of the things, the differences between our predecessors and us is that our predecessors had a lot of money to burn through.
Sure. Absolutely.
We don't, right? So with limited
So, but
resources,
that's exactly the thing, right? That question that you don't, and I feel I would be lying to myself if I didn't assume that if you possibly walked into this space looking different, if you maybe were a man with a tech background and white, I don't think we have cash issues anymore. And I'm saying. Right, and I'm saying that, I mean, and on purpose as somewhat of like a low-key pitch while we're doing the Black Elevator on an RBC sponsored podcast. Like I'm aware, but also who knows who's listening to this, and understanding like, yeah, absolutely, why doesn't that exist? And is it just because? And is it just because? And fair enough, I don't know. It's not like I've looked through the business plan and seeing it all, but I do like the opportunities that sometimes show up when we're not necessarily expecting it. And this idea is too brilliant for me not to bring it up on this show, for whatever ear might hear it and might want to reach out and say, let's put some life back into this. And so if you are, I mean, if you got some hedge funds or you are an angel investor, whatever the case is, and you're sick of hearing about how the space isn't fair, well, here's an opportunity to actually, let's put your money where your mouth is and make some differences where it matters, where people often have been ignored. So that is why I needed to talk about it, because it's too good. It's too good. And this is the thing. It's about opportunities, but it's also sometimes people have to say it's my turn to step up, right? And I say there's no better place than the Black Elevator RBC podcast. This is bank. This is money stuff, So yeah, I love it so much, and I can't wait for it to come back to life because it's needed not just where you are. It's needed in so many places. That conversation has been echoed and repeated over and over and over, and so far, it hasn't seen anyone stepped up to the plate, whether that means they don't care enough, which is sad, right? Which is sad, or they're just waiting for you, which is exciting. Absolutely.
thank you so much.
Absolutely. So let's get back to Power to Girls, right? So Power to Girls right now, is it exist virtually? Is it actually in person? What's happening? Because I believe you created this through the pandemic. And so now that hopefully we're getting, I don't even know what to say anymore. Do I say hopefully we're getting through it? We're on phase 1, phase 2, phase 4, fifth wave, seventh wave. Okay, so after we get out of this wave pool of COVID, is this something that's accessible to people all over North America, all over Canada? Is it localized? Tell us how people can be involved in it.
Yes, absolutely. So Power to Girls has actually been running for the past 9 years. Prior to the pandemic, we had established a partnership with the Toronto Catholic School Board and working on other partnerships within other school boards as well, where we actually run our programs through the schools. So at the height of the pandemic, of course, schools were shut down. Community organizations were on lockdown and everything. So we had moved all of our programming online, where we still, we're providing support. We provided COVID support, helplines, among many other things for our girls. But then one of the things that was suffering was the mentorship aspect. And I think, anyone that has run a mentorship program in any capacity will tell you that one of the hardest things about running a mentorship program is being able to find a solid time for both mentee and mentor to meet. That is one of the most challenging aspects of it. And then also you're dealing with people's availabilities, things happen, all of these different things. So we thought, we are in a world of tech, and we are, very much moving and evolving as time goes on into a very more virtual way of learning than ever before. So throughout the pandemic, the idea had always been there to create a mentorship platform, but then we felt like there's no better time than this very moment that we're in to do that and to really test that theory. So we built the platform, we added different features to the platform where girls can connect with mentors, but then they can also connect with each other. They can participate in different topics via group chats. They can access our helplines, so they can have conversations and communications with people in terms of like different things that they're experiencing. But then they can also share a part of themselves through stories, and they have like a whole personalized journal as well on the platform. So the whole premise was that we wanted to create a safer online space for young girls because we recognize that also, as a result of the pandemic, cyberbullying cases went up, mental health deteriorated. Girls were feeling more isolated. They were feeling a bit more, disconnected. And then there was a lot of information that was coming at them on social media. So how do we bridge, a gap and create something that allows for them to be the full selves, but then also allows for them to also enhance their personal development aspect? And that's how my Power app was built, and that's how it came about. So yeah, it's really around ensuring that girls have access, but then they also have access to women in different backgrounds, in different sectors. So then let's say if I am a 12-year-old girl that wants to be a lawyer, I can hit up a lawyer on the app and say, hi, I'm thinking about this as a career choice. What are some of the things that I should think about, right? And, we talk about the importance of representation. I think this is a perfect opportunity and the perfect platform for us to start that conversation and for us to keep that going.
I like it. Yeah, and my apologies. You guys made a big switch. It was a level up during the pandemic. You've been doing this for some time, absolutely. But this level up and being able to access all of this on an app. So right now, if there is a young girl who was wishing something like this, they can just go on their phone, download Power to Girls. And then you have just a plethora of different women that are available, standing by to help. So how did you access them? How did you canvas all of these individuals? And was there any pushback, or did you find people were excited to kind of offer their services?
I honestly think that, mentorship is something that women always want to do, right? We just launched the app this month, actually. So we're still recruiting. We're still, getting women on there. We have some of our girls already on the platform. So one of the key things that we also want to do is to really build partnerships with corporations and organizations so that this also becomes a part of your CSR, right? We always talk about wanting to see more representation. This is the perfect opportunity for that. So if there are companies out there, there are corporations, there are, C-suite level executives that would love for this to be a part of, their programming and would love for this to be a part of the offerings, then we definitely want to welcome them as mentorship partners, because I think in order for us to reach the goals that we have set for ourselves, from the SDGs to the sustainabilities to the representation markers and all these different things that we have aligned, we have to start with the youth. We have to start with the next generation. So yeah.
You're right. You are so right. I mean, as you've said before, you can't be what you can't see. I wrote that down and I love it. And it's so true. And the work you're doing, I can't say how excited I am about it. It's such a needed piece on so many levels. I feel like everything you throw up, you knock it out of the park, which is really very cool. I basically, just as a father, even though I'm a father to 3 sons that currently identify as boys, who knows what happens later on in life, but right now, just that there are people in our world that are forward thinking enough and understanding no one else is going to do it for people that look like us unless we do. And we can be mad, we can be upset and stomp our feet and say it's not our job, but ultimately, who knows us better than us, right? And so I think that's an important aspect of it. And you mentioned before, the Black experience versus like the Black woman's experience. It's a different experience. And even though you're not a monolith for all of Black women and Black girls, I do want to kind of, as we wrap up a little bit, just for the listeners to understand that, and even for Black men to understand, what is that difference in your opinion between like the Black woman's experiences versus the Black man's? And I don't mean it on opposition, right? But just the differences. Yeah.
Absolutely. You hit the nail right on the head. And this is not in opposition. You know, the Black woman experience is so diverse and is so interconnected. And there's so many intersectionalities to it. But I think one of the key things that we always have to remember is this, is that, you know, the Black woman's experience or the Black person's experience is not supposed to take away from yours, right? But then how are we creating spaces that allows for us to celebrate our uniqueness, celebrate our differences and our diversity in a way that is welcoming and in spaces that allows for us to be that, right? So are you creating a work environment that allows for me to come with my full self? Or are you creating an environment that requires for me to be someone else or to be a bit more digestible to you because, you know, you've been consciously thought that this is what a Black woman is supposed to be like, or this is what a Black man is supposed to be like, right? And, you know, the final thing that I'll say too is that, like, I think it's important for us to all recognize whether Black, white, brown, pink, yellow, whatever it is that we identify as, is that we all have conscious and unconscious biases. And in more ways than one, these biases are what informs the way that we relate to each other and the way that we communicate with each other. So anytime you find yourself in any space, ask yourself, how is my unconscious bias showing up here, right? Because in more ways than one, your privilege is always going to be an oppression to someone else, right? And we're all privileged in different ways and in different forms. And you being privileged doesn't take away, it's not supposed to take anything away from you. But the more important thing is that how am I using my privilege as either a stepping stone or as an opportunity for the people that are coming
Absolutely.
after, right? So
Yeah,
that's
you.
essentially really what it
We
is,
speak
right?
this. We are speaking the same language. I love it. As you were talking, this is one thing that it reminded me of. It was like, imagine you go, if your business or your corporation was a kitchen, for example, right? And you go in there and you're like, all right, we make lunch. That's what we make. And all that you have is like salt and pepper and maybe some seasoning salt. That's all you got. That's all. And so everyone who comes in is like, you got to be salt, you got to be pepper, or maybe seasoning salt. But you didn't give space to realize that you had paprika and cumin and you had jerk seasoning. And imagine the things you can make. This is what I mean by it doesn't take away. If anything, if we can create these spaces where people can be their true spicy selves, so you can create some of the dopest meals ever, who wouldn't want to eat a better meal? Right? It's better for everybody.
Yes, you're talking.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
I love it. This is good. Thank you so very much for being on the Black Elevator. You've already elevated me, and I know you've elevated a lot of the listeners. You've given them so many great nuggets to use. Please check out Power to Girls. It's available as an app right now. And, if you've got pockets or connections to one, Driver needs it for so many ways. And it's easy to reach out because you can find Aisha online. And where do people find you on your socials? And drop some of those.
Yes, absolutely. So I am on LinkedIn at Aisha Addo. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Aisha Afua, Aisha Afua. Personal website is www.aishaaddo.com. You can also find Power to Girls online at powertogirls.com. On Instagram, Power to Girls CA, and of course on Twitter as well, Power to Girls CA, and of course on Facebook too. You can also download the app on iOS and Android at My Power app. So you just put in the search bar My Power app, and you see a cute little illustration of a girl, and that is exactly what you're looking for. So yeah.
I love it. I wish we had the rights right now to Beyonce's Lion King album so we could go out with the My Power track on it. It's right, like right now that needs to be hitting underneath this. Who knows? We'll see what they could do. It might not happen, but if it does in post, that was all me. Woo! All right. Listen, thank you so very much. This was great. I hope we can even continue this chat even offline. This has been wonderful. Thank you for the work you've been doing.
Thank you so much for having me, Jesse. And thank you very much to the Black Elevator podcast for having me as well.
Absolutely. We're honored to have you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
If they only think with that banana, what you gonna wear today? It don't matter cause you're not my papa. I don't care what you thought of. I'm what you thought of. I don't care what you thought of. I'm what you thought of. Banana,
Tone. a name you need to get familiar with if you haven't already. Michelle Oluwatomi Akanbi, better known as Tome, is a Nigerian-French-Canadian singer, songwriter, and actor born in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. Short of just 2 years of this young, flourishing artist's career, Tome received the Canadian Juno Award for Reggae Record of the Year at the 2021 Junos. Thanks for listening to The Black Elevator. That was Tome, and I'm Jesse Lipscombe.
If they only think with their banana, what you gonna wear today? It don't matter cause you're not my papa. I don't care what you thought of. I'm what you thought of. I don't care what you thought of. I'm what you thought of. Banana, na 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 na. If you think with your banana.